Welcome to Java EE6 Programming Webinar Series from JPassion.com. Today's topic is EJB 3.1. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation. Just a bit of information for people who are attending this webinar for the first time. So Java EE6 course we are talking about here. We are just addressing newly added features in Java EE6. So this is not really a beginner course. This is for people who already have used Java EE5 and want to learn Java EE6 features. So we're going to just cover new features added in Java EE6. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation. EJB 3.1, which is introduced as part of the Java EE6, and we're going to again cover only newly added features. So these are the newly added features in EJB 3.1. EJB can be packaged in a WAR file, and it does introduce the singleton bean and timer service and asynchronous calls and the embeddable container, and local interface is now optional. So let's move on to the first topic, EJB packaged in a WAR file. So in Java EE5, if you're trying to build Java EE application that contains web components that are packaged in the WAR file and also EJB beans, you have to actually create three different files. WAR files for web components, and then EJB class, which is captured in the jar file, EJB jar file, and then you're going to create the EO file. So this is a bit cumbersome to deal with all these different file types. Now in Java EE6, EJB classes can be packaged in a WAR file as a default. Okay, so very straightforward. So let's do our first exercise. So what we're going to do in this first exercise is we're going to actually build a very simple EJB application, and we are going to build a web application actually that contains EJB bean, and we'll see how the WAR file is constructed. Okay, so you will see the EJB is part of the WAR file. All right, so let's try to create a brand new application. So we're going to create a web application. So select Java Web and Web Application. And we're going to call it EJB package WAR file, something like that. By the way, you can create this file from Maven as well. All right, so we are going to choose a Glassfish server, and again, the version we are going to use is Java EE6. And here, enable context and dependency injection. This means is if you click this one, it will create beans.xml file for CDI support. Okay, since we are not really using CDI in this example, we don't have to actually check this box. Okay, all right, then we are going to finish. So we created a very simple web application. Now we are going to create the session bean. So right-click the project, and new, and we're going to create the session bean. If you don't see this session bean in the pop-up window, then you can go to Other, and then you're going to select Enterprise Java Beans, and then you can select session bean right here. Okay, and next, and I'm going to call it My Session Bean, and we're going to provide package. I'll call it server. And we are creating stateless bean. You can see there are three different types of beans, stateless and stateful and singleton. And now creating interface is optional in EJB 3.1. EJB 3.0, if you're creating a local bean, you have to create a local interface, not anymore. So none of the beans has to have an interface. Okay, so we are going to uncheck this too as a default. All right, so we're going to create this session bean. Now we're going to create a very simple business method. Okay, so here we're going to say string public string, and we're going to call it say hello, and it's going to receive a string object, and we're going to just return a string called hello and plus name, and we'll have exclamation mark. Like this. Very simple business method. Okay. All right, so we created a bean. Now we are going to create a servlet that invokes this bean. So we're going to create new and a servlet. And we are going to call it hello servlet. And the package we're going to have in a different package, client. Okay, next, and finish. All right, so we created a servlet. And what we want to do is we want to invoke this bean that we created, my session bean. So we are going to use add EJB annotation, okay, and my session bean. So if you actually press Control Space, it will actually figure out which bean is available. So it knows that there is only one bean. It just gave that my session bean directly to me. So I'm going to call it a client. Okay. All right. So now we're going to import EJB class. So we're going to select fix import. So EJB has been imported. Okay. So here javax.ejb.ejb. Now we're going to call say hello method of this client. So here what you're going to do is we are going to change this calling EJB, and I'm going to change this one to and client, and again you can see say hello method is available, and I'm going to just say Sang Shin or something like that. Yeah, looks like okay, I'm going to just change it back. Okay, so I was missing that one. Okay, so EJB, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm not messing things up. Okay, and here client and client. Say hello. You know what? I'm gonna just copy. This is a bit annoying. Yeah, I don't have that one. Okay, so I'm going to. I'm gonna just copy this line. Okay, so here I'm gonna just change this one to client and say hello. Okay, so I'm gonna just move this. Yeah, looks like my insert key is actually kind of messed up. So I'm gonna just copy this. Okay, that's better. So I'm gonna just, okay, I'm gonna just call EJB. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna actually make sure that my insert is actually working. And yeah, so that insert key was actually messing things up. All right, so finally I got the code up and running. So I'm gonna just run this application now. Sorry about that. All right, so I have to actually call hello servlet. Okay, so you can see calling EJB, hello Sang Shin. Okay, so if I Sang Shin 3 or something like that, copy and refresh, then it actually display Sang Shin. So you can see, now let's actually see the EJB bean is actually part of the WAR file. As a default, in the development time, NetBeans doesn't actually create the distribution. So if you actually see this one, it's just using this build directory to deploy to the Glassfish. So what you're going to do is we're going to actually create the WAR file by right-clicking it, and if you say clean build, it's going to in fact create the WAR file. So we can actually see that WAR file. So I'll go to files this time, so you can see distribution directory is created, and then we're going to expand it. So you can see this is a WAR file that is created. So if you take a look at this one, okay, so inside the WAR file, you see EJB bean is part of the WAR file. Okay, so no more EF file, no more EJB jar file is needed in EJB 3.1. All right, so let's move on to the next topic. Singleton. So singleton is a new type of EJB bean introduced in EJB 3.1. Just like other beans, it provides EJB services. For example, it provides a built-in transactional and thread-safe and security services. And it's never passivated, unlike other beans. Okay. We are going to specify a bean using @singleton annotation. What it means is that the application will have a single instance of the bean. So by having a single instance of the bean, it can actually share state among multiple clients. And by using singleton annotation, you can also actually have application startup and callbacks, shutdown callbacks, and you're going to use @startup annotation. You're going to actually see examples of this one in a bit more detail later on. Also concurrency management. So since we are going to actually talk about these two in a bit more detail in the next slide, so let's move on. So this is the way that you are going to make a bean, a singleton bean. So you use @singleton annotation, very simple. Application startup and shutdown callbacks could be provided using @startup annotation along with a singleton annotation. So basically, the method specified with method annotated with post construct, the annotation will be called when application gets started up. And pre-destroy is when application is shutting down. A method annotated with this pre-destroy will be invoked. So let's see an example of that. So here, this is a singleton bean, and then we also specify startup annotation. What it means is that any method that is annotated with a post construct will be called after this singleton bean gets created during application startup. And pre-destroy is that before application is shut down, this pre-destroy, the annotation method is going to get invoked. Yeah, so the reason this application startup and shutdown callbacks are provided on singleton is because a singleton is a single object, single instance object. This is a very convenient place where application startup and shutdown callbacks can be provided. So that's the way the EJB 3.1 the designers decided to actually have this. Concurrency management is that concurrency is managed either by container, that's the default, or by the bean. So here you can specify concurrency management container. That's a default. So if you don't see any of this, that means it is actually included. Okay. Again, we're talking about the singleton annotated bean. And if you want to have a bean managed the concurrency management, then you can actually use concurrency management. Now, if you want to actually have the bean managed concurrency management, then you can use log read and log write to actually, the control the concurrency management. All right, so let's do the exercise 2, singleton. So we're going to just import the EJB 3.1 singleton project. So you should be able to run it on any ID of your choice. So I'm going to actually try this singleton, and I'm going to just run it. Go to project. Basically, it's going to create a singleton object that is going to be shared. That's actually basically counter the singleton object, and that counter will get incremented every time you are invoking that application. So it keeps increasing 5, 6 times. Now let's try to simulate another client. Okay, so let's say we have 2 clients talking to this application. So I opened this time Firefox, and I'm going to go to that application. Okay, so you can see it, it increases from 7 to 9. So I'm going to increment this. I'm going to actually increment the value by refreshing the page, meaning it's going to invoke that application. So this second user incremented the count to 11 times. Now, if I go back to previous client, and then if I refresh the page, you can see it's incrementing from 11, which is the current value of the counter. So you can see here, a singleton object is maintaining a state, in this case the counter value, and that is shared by multiple clients. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the code. So I'm going to actually use the lab documentation to explain the code. So this is what we have done. Okay, so this is the template client.xml file. So this is using JSF Facelet, JSF 2.0 Facelet. So here, this is the template XHTML file, and this template, this is the template XMHTML file, okay, that has the title and body, and then here the actual body will be inserted. So this is the client of this template. Okay, so you can see this is using UI composition and specify the template.xhtml file of this. Okay, and then it's actually providing the actual content. So here, the value of this one will be inserted into this location. Okay, so this is the expression language expression here is actually going to counter bean, and then it calls the get hit count method. Okay, so let's go to counter. So this is the manage bean. So you can see this is the manage bean, and in this manage bean we are calling EJB. So again, we are using EJB annotation to inject this EJB called counter bean. Okay, and counter bean is basically a singleton, the EJB bean, and it has a hit int counter, and that is actually the one that gets incremented. Okay, so very simple application. All right, the next one is a startup. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to add another class called the myStartupBean, and then again this is a singleton bean, and then we are going to annotate with the startup. Okay, so we are going to actually then have two methods. One is a startup, the other one is called the shutdown, and we are going to just annotate with the post construct and pre-destroy. Okay, so when we actually run this application with this bean, then we should actually see this, we are just kind of displaying this message in the system log file. Okay, so that is this application startup. So you can see here we have this my startup bean. Okay, so I'm going to just clean the console. All right, so I'm going to actually run this application. And it works exactly the same as EJB 3.1 singleton, but this time we have added another singleton bean that contains the startup and shutdown callback method. All right, so if you take a look at the system log file, you can see startup method of my startup bean is called. Okay. Now, if I go to the services, I'm going to actually undeploy this application. So I'm going to refresh this page. You can see the application I just start up, this one. I'm going to undeploy. Okay, now you can see a shutdown method of my.bean is called. Okay, all right, so that actually verifies that these callbacks are being invoked correctly. All right, so let's move on to the next timer service. So timer service provides an ability to declaratively create cron, Unix cron-like schedules to trigger EJB method. So they provide two annotations, schedule annotation and timeout annotation. So timeout is a one-time, the timeout, and schedule is basically, interval based. So let's see an example of this. So here, I want to invoke this method during the weekdays, Monday to Friday at 9 o'clock. Okay, so that's basically, you are going to use a schedule annotation for that method. Timeout is when timeout occurred, you provide the timer object, which contains the duration, and when timeout occurred, and this method will be invoked. All right, so let's do exercise 3. Okay, so we're going to actually try EJB 3.1 timer session project. Again, most of these projects are Maven projects, so you should be able to run it in any, either using Eclipse or NetBeans. So this is a web application. And so, when I click the set timer, it's going to set the timer. So programmatic timeout. This is actually, the setting the timeout in 3 seconds. Okay. And here, last automatic timeout. This is going to get actually, scheduled every, I'm not sure how much time for this particular application. Okay. So now you can click refresh, or you can click this one. So, we are going to actually access the new timeout value. So we're going to actually try this. Okay. And you can see the timeout has occurred in 3 seconds. Okay. And this one will be actually also the automatic timeout also occurred. I don't know, I think maybe every 2 minutes or something like that. So you can, again, okay, here you go. So if you refresh, and you can actually see, this is actually being updated based on interval. Okay, so let's see the code. And you can also see automatic timeout gets actually, being called every minute. Okay, so we can see the schedule is actually being invoked. A scheduled method is being invoked every minute. So, you can actually see multiple of this every minute. Okay, so let's see the code. So here we have a timer client XHTML facelet code. So here we are going to call the get last programmatic timeout and get last automatic timeout property value from this, and then we set the timer. And the last one is actually, this is a refresh, and it's basically an action, and that means, we are basically refreshing this page. Okay, so that's the reason why it's the same thing of, the clicking this one or this one. It's basically when you click refresh, it's actually, calling this page one more time. That's what's happening. Okay, so you can see the second automatic timeout has occurred. All right. So this is the timer manager. So again, this is the managed bean, and inside this managed bean, we are calling timer session bean. Okay, so timer session bean is the singleton with the startup. Okay, so here, yeah, we are not using any startup method. Yeah, so this is probably not needed right here because we are not doing anything. And then we actually getting the timer service. Okay, so as a resource, we inject the timer service, and then we are going to call create timer. Then we got the timer object, and so these are two annotations: timeout. Okay, so basically this timer is actually this method gets called just once based on the time. That timer is actually 3 seconds. If you see this one. This is what the set timer method of this bean gets invoked, and that's actually 3 seconds. Okay, 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. And this is a schedule. So every minute, so this is the cron-like notation. So every minute of every hour, we are going to call this automatic timeout method. So that's the reason we're actually seeing automatic timeout occurred right here, being displayed. Okay, as a log message. Okay, so that's straightforward. Automatic timer, this is actually the same thing. So I'm going to just move forward. Asynchronous calls. So in EJB 3.0, and below, the only way that you can have asynchronous processing is using a message-driven bean. Yeah, usage of message-driven bean is not that much difficult, but still a bit of chore. Okay. So in EJB 3.1, it provides asynchronous annotation. So you can actually call this method the asynchronously. So any method that is annotated with asynchronous annotation will be called asynchronously. What that means is that the method returns right away, while the container executes that method separately, meaning in separate thread. Okay. You have two different options. You can actually receive future objects so that you can, retrieve the return value or check for exceptions or attempt to cancel in-progress invocation. Or if you want to just invoke a method asynchronously and forget about it, then you don't have to actually have a return object. So it depends on your application. So here, this is an example where we want to call send mail method and we want to receive future object right away. And then we can use this future object to see the result, whether it has been finished correctly, what is the result, and things like that. So this future object is the same future object you've seen from Java SE5. Right, so let's do asynchronous calls. Exercise 4. Yeah, so here we are simulating the reason you want to use async call is, when you are invoking a method which performs, which actually invokes the external service, for example, the accessing database or accessing a web service and things like that, which takes a long time, and you don't want to have your application to be stuck, right? So in that case, you're going to use asynchronous, and later on you can find out, whether that has been succeeded or not by using future object, or if you want to just forget about it, then you can just call it and forget about it. Okay. So we're going to actually try the EJB 3.1 async Maven project. And so in this application, we are going to just call it and forget about it. And it's going to it's going to actually perform JDBC operation. It's going to actually use it's going to actually save the data into, so when you actually enter a title of the book, is going to save that book into a books database table. So that's going to actually take a long time. So what we want to do is we want to just kind of, come back. So this application is a little bit of kludge. So let me actually show the code first, and then, let's run the application. So here, this is the bean, and then we call create book async method. Okay, so if you take a look at this this beans method, this is annotated with asynchronous. So anytime you are calling this method, it will return right away. The reason, and the return type is void. Okay, so that's the way that you can find out that this method is not returning a future object. It just returns right away. Okay. So in this case, what we want to do is that, I want to persist the book information into the database by calling this method. Then I want to actually get back right away. Okay. And in this case, just kind of kludge, we just wait the 2 seconds and then display. Okay. We just give enough time for the separate thread, okay, by the container that is performing this particular operation to be done. And then we just kind of display the result. Okay. All right, so let's run async, this one. So let's actually take a look at the database first. It's actually using this simple table, books. Let me see what is a persistent XML file that is actually using. I want to actually see what table is using. This is persistent XML file. Sample, and it's okay. It's actually and entity is book. Okay, and let me see what is the okay. So book. Okay, so I'm gonna actually Yeah, so this is the book table, so first book. So I'm going to just remove this guy. Oh, okay, so that's fine. I don't have to remove it. I can just add a new book, right? So I'm going to just run this application. Run it. All right, so I'm going to say second book from Sang and submit. So in 2 seconds, it will say, yeah, second book from Sang has been the save in the persistent database. So if I want to refresh the page, refresh the table. Yeah, so second book saying, oh, okay, so it looks like it's actually, table is actually dropped and recreated. So this is the title that has been added. Okay, so idea is basically, this method gets returned right away, and then separate thread is used to persist that particular the item into the table, because that's supposed to take a long time. Okay. Now let's actually try the async using future. So this is a case that, it's actually doing pretty much the same thing, but this time we are going to receive a future object. Okay. So we are going to call create book async using future. So we actually get the future object, and then later on we can use a future object to find out what happened. Okay. All right. So you can see this method is annotated with the asynchronous, but it returns a future object. Okay. All right. And the future object is basically, the book of async result. All right. So let's run async feature application. Yeah, it works pretty much the same. The third book. Submit. Okay. So again, if you take a look at the, if you view the data, then you can see the third book is added. Okay. All right, so again, the code is relatively straightforward, and basically this book title is actually coming from the future object. Okay, all right. Let's move on to the next. Embedded container. So embedded container has been around on other platforms such as Tomcat and Jetty. For testing purpose and things like that. And EJB 3.1 now actually allows the EJB container to be embeddable container, meaning you don't have to use the app server such as a Glassfish or the WebLogic in order to execute EJB application as a Java SE application. So EJB 3.1 now provides an API for initialize a container from your Java SE application. So if you see the picture over here, it's Java SE, and it provides a transaction manager, security system, managing messaging engine. All this EJB service is actually being provided as a library. Okay, you can get the context object, and by using context object, you can invoke, you can actually get the address of EJB bean. And so it runs in any Java SE environment. It's basically a set of jar files in your class path. And the main reason you might want to use EJB 3.1 embeddable container is for testing, okay? Because when you perform testing of EJB beans, you do not want to start your app server. Instead, you want to actually perform this testing as part of your nightly build process as Java SE application. Okay, and it does also provide a batch processing as well. All right, so this is the code. You are going to call a static method called the create EJB container method of EJB container class. And once you got the EJB container, from the container, you get the context object. And once you got the context object, you can perform lookup operation that specifies the location of your EJB. And then you are going to be able to get the reference of that EJB object. Then you should be able to call. Yeah, I should have a parenthesis here. Okay, my mistake. All right, so let's do exercise 5. Yeah, so here, the lab document actually shows you how to create these applications step by step. So I'm going to just go over and then I'm going to actually run the solution application. So you create a new project. It's a Java SE application, and we're going to call it EJB 3.1 embedded. And we don't have to, yeah. So here in this example, we are going to actually use the test to run the application. Okay, so we don't have to create a main method. Okay, and then we add EJB bean. So we're going to say new entity class. Okay, and book and my package. And so we have created entity. So we can actually perform the persistent operation using entity bean. Okay. So you have this code, and then we're gonna the import. Then we're gonna actually create the item EJB stateless bean. Okay, so we are using entity bean, and then we're gonna create a stateless bean that invokes that that entity bean. So we're gonna call it that stateless bean as item EJB. So this is a stateless bean, and then we are going to, we have a persistent context object, meaning entity manager object, and then we're going to just persist the book. Okay, so we're actually performing all EJB operation, including persistency, in Java SE application. Okay, so the reason we got all these compilers is because it's a Java SE application, and you have to add all the jar files. Okay, so these are the jar files that you have to add, and these jar files are actually under Glassfish modules and Glassfish modules endorsed and Glassfish live embedded. And so these are the files that you are going to include in the class path of your Java SE application. Okay, so these are basically what you have to do. So once you got the jar files, then the compiler should be gone. Okay, and then we are going to create a persistency.xml file. Okay, using sample, the built-in database. Okay, and we're going to drop and create, meaning every time we run this application, the table will be dropped and be created. And we also have to specify entity class. In this case, is a book. And here, you can see we are using JTA. Okay. All right, and then we're going to actually add testing code. So here, the way that you can run this application is using main class, or in this case, you're going to use the test class. Okay, so new Java class on the test package, and we are going to call it item EJB test, and the name of the package is test package. And so here, basically we have a before class and test methods. Okay, so before this test method gets executed, we want to perform. So we're going to create, in this case, container object. Okay, so we got the container, EJB container object. Okay, so that's the EJB container type here. And then we're going to get the context object. Okay, so this is, this gets executed before this test method gets executed. Okay, and then basically we perform a lookup operation. Okay. Okay, item EJB bean, and then once you got the EJB bean, then rest of the operation should work exactly the same. Okay, so we are basically performing some assert operation. Okay, to make sure that things are actually being done correctly. Okay, and then we build a jar file that contains the EJB. Okay, and then we're gonna actually run the testing. Okay. So you should be able to see the standard output: creating EJB container, looking for EJB, create a book, and closing EJB container. So those are the logging messages that we see. Here. Yeah, so creating a book. Yeah, so these are the logging messages: looking for EJB, and then create a book, and yeah, then the then there are actually other yeah, so this is actually from the JB container. Yeah, so this is actually from other code. All right, so we are going to run. Yeah, so this is the the application that contains all these changes. Okay, so we are going to run this test. So basically, what you're going to do is basically you go to test package and you're going to either call run file or test file. So let's try that. So this is test code, and I'm going to run the file. Okay, so it's creating a container. So, you can see a lot of things are happening. Once you create the container, all the initialization of the container is actually being done here. Okay. And it's deploying the application. Okay. Okay, so security services started successfully. So these are all the services that typical EJB container has to provide. Here we go. Okay, so looking for EJB and then it creating a book and then closing an EJB container. Okay, so that's what we see. Okay, and the testing is finished. Okay, so that is EJB embedded container. And optional, so the reason that this embedded container is again useful is for testing purpose, as we have done before. And you can run this testing as part of your nightly build process. Okay, all right. The next topic is optional log interface. I already mentioned, that in EJB 3.1, even for the local bean, you don't have to have a local interface. You still could have a local interface if you want to, but it's not required. Okay. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. One topic that in the hands-on lab, in the hands-on lab is the RESTful service is with EJB, and we actually covered this one in JAX-RS 1.1, so I'm not going to talk about this one. So, all right, so let me just make sure that